You are listening Good to Great by Jim Collins. While Collins' earlier work Built to Last explored how exceptional organizations maintain their superior performance over time, most businesses never achieve that elite status. This raises a crucial question. What transforms ordinary companies into extraordinary ones? How do they differentiate themselves from rivals who remain trapped in mediocrity? Collins and his research team tackled this puzzle by analyzing three distinct categories of American public companies across a 5-year investigation. The first category included enterprises that transitioned from ordinary to extraordinary. These organizations had delivered average or below-average market returns for 15 years before achieving breakthrough performance. Collins defines extraordinary performance as generating cumulative returns at least 3 times greater than the general market for 15 consecutive years. The second category consisted of direct competitor organizations that maintained mediocrity or declined despite having similar opportunities during critical transition periods. The third category encompassed businesses that briefly achieved the transition from ordinary to extraordinary before regressing to performance levels significantly below market averages. Throughout their extensive 5-year investigation, Collins and his team analyzed more than 6,000 press articles and conducted over 2,000 pages of executive interviews to identify precisely what distinguished extraordinary companies from their competitors. This analysis reveals actionable insights that can help your organization achieve the same transformation. Collins presents a powerful metaphor to illustrate the strategic approach that extraordinary businesses employ to guide their decision-making processes. Picture a clever fox attempting to capture a hedgehog. Daily, the fox devises numerous surprise strategies and cunning approaches to catch its prey. Yet each time, the hedgehog employs an identical response. It rolls into a protective, impenetrable sphere of spikes. This unwavering commitment to a straightforward defense strategy enables the hedgehog to triumph consistently. Extraordinary companies discover their unique hedgehog principle by addressing 3 fundamental questions. In what area can we achieve world-class excellence? What drives our deepest passion? Which single economic metric should we focus on intensely? After approximately 4 years of deliberation and refinement around these questions, extraordinary companies eventually uncover their distinctive hedgehog principle. From that moment forward, every organizational decision aligns with this principle, and exceptional results follow. The hedgehog principle centers on organizational self-awareness, authentic behavior aligned with that identity, and maintaining crystal-clear objectives. By exploring and answering these questions, you enable focused growth rather than scattered expansion in multiple directions. The essence is simplicity. From an external perspective, extraordinary companies appear to undergo sudden, dramatic transformations. However, these organizations frequently remain unaware they're experiencing change. Their evolution lacks defined slogans, launch events, or formal change initiatives. Instead, their success accumulates through countless small, incremental advances toward their straightforward strategy. Similar to a flywheel, these modest improvements generate momentum that encourages companies to push harder until sufficient velocity builds for a breakthrough. Their steadfast commitment to the hedgehog principle creates a beneficial cycle of motivation and advancement. Consider Nucor, a steel producer facing potential bankruptcy in 1965. Nucor recognized they could manufacture steel more effectively and efficiently than competitors by utilizing mini-mills, a more cost-effective and adaptable steel production method. They constructed one mini-mill, attracted customers, built another, gained additional customers, and continued this pattern. In 1975, CEO Ken Iverson recognized that consistent execution of this exact approach, maintaining momentum in the same direction, could eventually make them America's most profitable steel company. Though it required over 20 years, the company ultimately achieved this objective. Nucor subsequently outperformed the general market by 5 times. Their competitors failed to consistently build momentum in one direction. Instead, they attempted to change their fortune through dramatic pivots and rushed acquisitions. When these strategies failed to produce desired outcomes, discouragement set in, forcing another directional change that prevented any flywheel momentum from developing. Once you establish your hedgehog principle, maintain unwavering commitment. This represents the only path to meaningful results. Extraordinary companies primarily leverage new technology to accelerate existing momentum, rather than allowing technology to dictate direction. For these organizations, technology serves as a tool toward their goals, not the reverse. When extraordinary companies evaluate whether to adopt specific technology, they measure it against their broader organizational objectives and direction. If the technology advances their established path, they become pioneers in its implementation. Otherwise, they either disregard it or maintain industry-standard adoption pace. Comparison companies often perceive new technologies as threats. They fear being left behind by technological trends and rush to adopt without comprehensive strategic planning. The drugstore chain, Walgreens, exemplifies optimal technology utilization. During the e-commerce explosion, an online pharmacy called Drugstore.com launched amid significant market excitement. The perception that Walgreens was slower to embrace online business cost them 40% of their share value, creating pressure to hastily pursue this technology. Rather than surrendering to pressure, Walgreens evaluated how an online presence could support their core strategy, enhancing drugstore convenience and increasing per-customer profitability. Just over a year later, they launched Walgreens.com, which advanced their original strategy through innovations like online prescription services. While Drugstore.com lost nearly all its value within a year, Walgreens recovered and nearly doubled their stock price during the same period. Everyone understands that organizational leadership matters. However, Collins' research revealed just how vital it truly is. Every company that transitioned from ordinary to extraordinary possessed Level 5 leadership during their transformation. Level 5 leaders excel not only as individuals, team members, managers, and leaders. They also demonstrate single-minded ambition for their organization, possess fanatical drive toward results, and desire their company to continue thriving long after their departure. Additionally, they embody humility. Far from being ego-driven, Level 5 leaders display modesty and restraint. They hesitate to claim credit for organizational achievements. They continuously seek opportunities to recognize their team, while quickly accepting responsibility for shortcomings. This may sound like describing a mythical person, but exceptional companies are built by exceptional leaders. Consider Darwin Smith, who transformed Kimberly-Clark into a leading global paper-based consumer goods company. He refused to cultivate a heroic or celebrity image. Instead, he dressed simply like a farmer, spent vacations working on his Wisconsin farm, and enjoyed socializing with plumbers and electricians. Conversely, two-thirds of comparison company CEOs possess enormous egos that harm their organization's long-term success. This becomes most apparent in inadequate succession planning. Stanley Galt provides a prime example. The notoriously tyrannical, yet successful, Rubbermaid CEO left behind such a weak management team that under his successor, Rubbermaid declined from Fortune magazine's most admired company to being acquired by a competitor within just 5 years. The significance of hiring appropriate people extends beyond CEOs and senior leadership. Collins discovered that prioritizing excellent hiring throughout the entire organization creates tremendous impact. Actually asking who takes priority over asking what. The transformation from ordinary to extraordinary always begins with bringing the right people into the company and removing the wrong people, even before defining a clear forward path. This works because the right people will eventually discover a path to success. When Dick Cooley became CEO of pre-scandal Wells Fargo, he realized he could never predict the major changes resulting from banking industry deregulation. However, he reasoned that by recruiting the most talented people into the company, together they would somehow find ways to succeed. He proved correct. Warren Buffett later called Wells Fargo's executives the best management team in business, and the company flourished remarkably. Extraordinary companies prioritize finding people with appropriate character traits over professional capabilities. They understand the right people can always receive training and education, and they cultivate environments where dedicated workers flourish while unmotivated workers leave. In senior management, people either depart quickly or remain for extended periods. Extraordinary companies never hire inappropriate people, regardless of urgent needs. However, they hire as many suitable people as available, even without specific positions planned for them. When extraordinary companies identify inappropriate people, they act swiftly. They either terminate that employee or attempt to relocate them to a more suitable role. Never delay addressing inappropriate people. It only frustrates the rest of the organization. Extraordinary companies consistently navigate the Stockdale Paradox, named after a U.S. admiral captured during the Vietnam War. As a high-ranking officer imprisoned at the notorious Hanoi Hilton facility, Stockdale endured repeated torture by captors. Uncertain whether he would reunite with his family, and despite terrible circumstances, he never lost faith that somehow he would return home. Simultaneously, he avoided foolish optimism like fellow prisoners who believed they'd return by Christmas, and suffered heartbreak when that didn't occur. Later, Stockdale attributed his survival to his ability to face harsh realities while maintaining unwavering faith. Extraordinary companies operate similarly. They confront brutal realities of their situation, while retaining absolute faith that somehow they'll ultimately prevail. Whether facing intense competition or significant regulatory changes, extraordinary companies master the delicate balance of acknowledging these realities without becoming defeated. Some actually embrace it as motivation. For example, when Procter & Gamble entered the paper goods market, the two major existing players responded very differently. Market leader Scott Paper believed their situation was hopeless, and they could never compete against a giant like P&G. They attempted diversification into categories where P&G didn't compete. Meanwhile, Kimberly-Clark welcomed the opportunity to compete against the best. They even held a moment of silence for P&G during an executive meeting. The outcome: 2 decades later, Kimberly-Clark actually owned Scott Paper and dominated P&G in 6 of 8 product categories. Companies cannot face harsh realities if they're never discussed. Leaders must create environments where difficult issues can be raised without hesitation. Strong, charismatic leaders can become liabilities rather than assets if others want to hide unpleasant truths from them. In management meetings, leaders must function as Socratic moderators, asking questions to uncover honest opinions instead of providing ready answers. Leaders should also encourage vigorous debates during meetings so optimal decisions emerge. When mistakes occur, study them carefully to understand what went wrong, but avoid assigning blame. This only discourages people from sharing truth. Establish warning mechanisms to empower your team to raise concerns about their observations. This helps you focus on truth, even when it's difficult to accept. Collins found that extraordinary companies didn't possess more or superior information than comparison companies. They simply confronted and addressed it more honestly. Let's revisit the hedgehog principle, the concept that by asking yourself key questions as an organization, you can create guidance that helps your company transition from ordinary to extraordinary. To maximize this hedgehog method, you need a culture of rigorous self-discipline. Knowing your direction isn't sufficient. You must actively take steps to reach your destination. A culture of self-discipline differs from having a single disciplinary tyrant. Tyrannical CEOs sometimes manage temporary greatness for their companies. However, when discipline depends on a tyrant's enforcement, it's unsustainable. People will rebel whenever they're not under the tyrant's direct supervision. Once the tyrant permanently departs, discipline collapses. This actually occurred at Rubbermaid. Within several years of the self-proclaimed sincere tyrant and CEO Stanley Galt's departure, Rubbermaid lost 59% of its value. Extraordinary companies are filled with people possessing high levels of diligence and intensity, people working toward their company's straightforward hedgehog strategy. Consider Wells Fargo again. The company understood that operating efficiently would be crucial in the deregulated banking environment. They froze executive salaries, sold corporate aircraft, and replaced the executive dining room with an inexpensive college dorm caterer. The CEO even began criticizing people who submitted reports in expensive, fancy binders. While these actions may not have been necessary for Wells Fargo to become exceptional, they demonstrate willingness to go above and beyond. Leadership supported all of this because they knew these luxuries weren't advancing their straightforward hedgehog goal, and they possessed the self-discipline to sacrifice those comforts. The essential takeaway is, companies that transition from ordinary to extraordinary achieve this by creating a straightforward hedgehog principle, hiring appropriate people, especially in leadership positions, and pursuing their strategy with a culture of rigor and self-discipline. Several focused questions will help you form your hedgehog principle. What can you achieve world-class excellence in? What can you be passionate about? And which key economic indicator should you concentrate on? Found these insights valuable? Hit like and subscribe for book summaries that could transform your thinking. The purchase link for Good to Great is waiting in the description, and we're curious, which of these concepts resonated most with you? Drop a comment below.